This week, we're taking a look at what appears to be a growing distrust among members of the Ravenswood City School District Board of Education as they move forward with the district's strategic planning process. Elena, tell us what's going on there.
So I think this has been sort of simmering for a while since the board election in November, but there was a retreat of last weekend, which was really supposed to be this multi-hour thing for the board members to get together, to find some common ground, to look at their long-term goals. There's a lot of stuff coming up for Ravenswood the next couple months and years that they need to sort of come together and work on. And the day started with this sort of kumbaya sense of sharing like their backstories, where they came from, their passion for education and service, and what got them to serve on the board. And it pretty quickly descended into sniping, open conflict, a lot of sparring over sort of the direction of the district, particularly between the incumbents and the newer elected board members.
So does it seem like these disagreements are strategic about policies, or is it kind of personal and political in nature?
Yeah, didn't you say they wouldn't even call each other by their first names?
There was one board member who wouldn't address the interim superintendent by her first name. I think it's both. I think there's certainly the political landscape, which has shifted with the November election, with the two new board members, Tam Chabot-Maheen, who's the president, and vice president, and Stephanie Fitch, who were really elected as sort of, they ran on campaigns of change and reform and wanting to, disrupt the status quo in the district. The whole board, but it seems like pushed by the election, got rid of the former superintendent, who had been really controversial and a lot of people had opposed. And so now they're faced with a lot of difficult decisions. They're trying to develop a whole new strategic plan, which was sort of what brought up a lot of these issues. Anna Maria Polito and Sharifa Wilson were really critical of how the process started over this summer with the formation of this steering committee of parents and community members and elected officials, and they felt like they weren't involved in selecting the members of this committee, and it wasn't clear sort of why these people had ended up on the list, and it was done over the summer. And
wasn't the district criticized earlier, though, for their middle school that they didn't have enough community input? Do you think that that's kind of reaction to what happened earlier? Or
I think yes, but I think that was a different issue. It was under the former superintendent.
Yeah.
They really wanted to open a comprehensive middle school, so instead of having K-8 schools where the middle schoolers are not getting the sort of tailored instruction they need, teachers opposed that because they felt like it was really rushed through, even though everyone supported in general the idea of having a standalone middle school. In this case, I think it's an interim superintendent who's new at her job, leading this pretty intensive process. They do have a consultant helping, and they're trying to sort of get this going to have a draft plan by October, and then to potentially vote on something by December. And it seems like that's a pretty ambitious timeline given what's been going on.
But you mentioned like a minute ago that the new people on the board came to disrupt status quo. And I mean, if I was not one of the new people, if I was the status quo that is to be disrupted, I could see how that would foster some resentment. Like these guys ran on a mission to disrupt what I've been doing for years.
Yeah.
So is that kind of at the heart of the tension, or are there actual like policies that would impact students that the two sides are divided over? Because you've reported a lot about Ravenswood money problems. It's attendance, like enrollment problems that's been dropping and all that. And so this is a pretty critical time for them to get it together on those issues. So do they have actual like disagreements, or is it just kind of like a bitter, you've come here to disrupt me and I will oppose whatever you propose? Like, how deep are the disagreements, I guess?
I think it's not a lot of disagreement over sort of how to support students and wanting the best for students in a historically struggling district. It's more these sort of who's in power and leadership and has control over how these big processes are going, and feeling included or not included in sort of the path of Ravenswood at a really critical time. I think they all agree that there are a lot of big decisions. They're going to be talking about closing a school this year because of declining enrollment. There are all these sort of outside pressures that they talk about all the time affecting families in East Palo Alto, gentrification, families leaving the district because they can't afford to live here anymore. So if I was a parent or a voter in East Palo Alto, I would be pretty concerned that the elected officials that need to lead the district are not in agreement sort of how to move forward.
And they have a consultant called Attuned Education Partners, which I think is a kind of cool name considering the dynamics on the board. They're so not attuned. Okay. So who are the players in this debate? I know you mentioned the two new ones, Shabomahin and
Fitch.
And Fitch, right? And who's on the other side of this?
I mean, I don't want to pit board members against each other, but yeah, the longer serving board members are Ana Maria Pulido and Sharifa Wilson. And then there's also Maria Elena Gaona Mendoza, who was elected a few years ago, and I think she sort of leans towards being aligned with the newcomers, but is somewhat of a centrist.
And a quick question, I just wanted to ask, so when you mentioned they want to disrupt status quo, like what were they talking about during the campaigns? Like what are their major goals of the newer board members?
They really stressed transparency, improving communication. That had been a major criticism of the former superintendent, Gloria Hernandez-Goff. That's just she made sort of top-down decisions. She didn't communicate well or connect well with teachers sort of at the ground level. And a lot of it was surrounding her leadership as well. And I think people wanted to elect board members who would support getting a new superintendent. So that was a big thing. And I think they have, with Gina Sudaria, who was a teacher and administrator and sort of come up through the district herself, in the temporary position, I think teachers have responded pretty well to her. A few people spoke on her behalf at the board meeting last night, just saying, there's no need to launch a permanent superintendent search. We have someone here who knows the community, who has the experience here, and that we support, and what more could you need in a candidate? But they are moving forward with a formal search for a permanent superintendent. So that's a whole other thing that they're going to embark on this year.
Well, it seems like a best practice, even if you do end up choosing the person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted you to talk a little bit more about this commission, because that seems where some of the tension started bubbling up. So
The committee.
the committee, yeah. It was 21 members, and now you said
Now it's more than 30. They added a few members based on feedback from Ana Pulido and Sharifa Wilson that all the schools weren't represented, so they added parents and teachers and a few community members. So it's a pretty hefty committee, and they're going to be dealing with hefty issues, the mission and vision of the district and goals. And
is there issue there's too many people, not enough people? I mean, what was, didn't Wilson have some?
they just wanted it to be more representative.
group.
And now it's a large...
Giant
That's what
group.
it is.
Yeah, it wasn't the size, it was just having people, like having every school represented and understanding sort of how these people were chosen, and allowing the board to be the final sort of say on, yes, we approve all these members, which they did last night.
And I know you said it's the strategic planning process. What types of things are they going to be talking about? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's really developing a long-term vision for the district. So sort of they are going to collect a lot of data and survey and do focus groups on sort of where is the district now, and what do parents want out of the district moving forward, what do they want from leadership. And sort of, I think every school district has this. I think in some districts they're more successful in being something that can be actually implemented versus just this sort of bureaucratic process then results in a plan that sits on a shelf somewhere. But the idea is just to have a guiding vision for the district, which I think is really critical for Ravenswood at a time when the leadership has changed. And like I said, they're facing all these sort of forces that are going to determine the future sort of sustainability of the district, really.
And you said they want to have some sort of plan by when? October?
A draft plan for the board to consider by October.
Oh my gosh.
How's that even possible? I mean, so it sounds like 30 people in a committee. It's almost like a classroom without a teacher. So it's like, do they have like subcommittees? Is there like a well set out plan for narrowing down options?
I don't think there's a subcommittee of the committee, but their first meeting is next week, so I think we'll see how that goes.
Are there co-chairs? Are there leaders? Is it just like a direct democracy kind of thing?
President, Tamara Shabomahin and Ana Maria Pulido are on it just to represent the board. I think the consultant from Attune will serve as kind of a facilitator for the process, and they've done this with other districts, so presumably they know how this goes and can help. And the board is supposed to approve something by December, and I think that is an ambitious timeline given the number of people involved and the meatiness of this issue.
What is the December deadline based on? Because
it's not a deadline.
Because I can't imagine that goal being met, but it's possible.
It's just a timeline.
Keep in mind, I cover Palo Alto where things take 10 times as long as initially planned. Maybe East Palo Alto is ultra efficient with its committee processes, but December sounds like.
It's just a timeline. There's no sort of requirement, and I wouldn't be surprised if it pushes into next year. So
Okay. And they're also talking about renaming schools.
Yes.
Can we talk about that?
yeah, so they decided last night at the board meeting that they're going to form another committee, but a board subcommittee of Ana Maria Polito and Marilena Gaona Mendoza to look first at this issue that has bubbled up over concerns that because Ravenswood Middle School absorbed Cesar Chavez Academy, the name Cesar Chavez sort of disappeared and was lost. So there's a lot of people in the community who are really upset about losing sort of the symbolism of him as a figure and a honored person in the community on the name of a school. So they're going to look at that first and talk about if Ravenswood Middle School should be renamed and include the name Cesar Chavez in some way. And then they're going to look at all school names in the district, which
that was striking. How do we get from this one particular issue to a re-examination of every school name in the district?
So they talk about this at their last board meeting, and Sharifa Wilson suggested, if we're going to talk about one, we should talk about all of them. She also described that there's some sort of anger in the community over another renaming of Ronald McNair, which merged with Los Robles, so the names of the schools just merged. And so people, particularly African Americans in the community who are very attached to the Ronald McNair name, are now wondering why the process is different for Cesar Chavez. And so there seems to be some conflict around that as well.
Did that school just become Los Robles?
Now it's Los Robles, Ronald McNair, so hyphenated. So they didn't lose either name, but they kept them both. And they are, since they're talking about closing a school or multiple schools, it's unclear. But they think this should be sort of folded into that. So if we end up closing a school and we might want to keep that name, we should consider all names as things are sort of reorganized throughout the district.
But is there a danger that by including all schools in the district in the process, you will kind of lose sight of the more urgent near-term issue, which is the Ravenswood Cesar Chavez?
Yeah, I think that's what a few of the board members expressed last night. So they're going to give themselves sort of a expedited deadline to deal with Cesar Chavez first, and then they'll get to all of the other names.
Worth pointing out, it was a unanimous vote, so no tension.
Yeah.
Still possible.
Anything else to add?
No, I think there's going to be a lot to watch for Ravenswood in the coming months and throughout the school year. So
you're going to be going to those committee meetings, the 30-member committee
I'm going to aim
meetings?
to go, and some of them are multi-hour meetings, but I'm going to.
Well, how could they not be? I mean, if everybody talks for 2 minutes, that's an hour.
Yeah.
And people on committees who like to volunteer for committees tend to be people who like to talk for more than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I found.
And they're all public meetings, so other people who want to, participate and weigh in should attend if they want to be a part of the process.
When do those start?
Their first meeting is next Thursday.
Oh, cool. So they're jumping right in.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. All right, well, that wraps up this edition of Behind the Headlines. Thanks for watching. Stay up to date on all the latest Palo Alto news at paloaltoonline.com or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.